Number 5 on this list is the dancing plague of 1518. That's right guys, you heard that right. A plague about dancing. Honestly, I'd never heard of this before, and in my whole time working on this channel, this is actually the coolest and strangest thing that I've ever come across. So in Strasbourg, Alsace, which is now modern day France, in the year 1518, from July all the way to September, people just started dancing. For months, hundreds of people were dancing in the streets of France and they couldn't stop. It's said that one woman started dancing in the streets one day and then some more came and they just kept going for months with absolutely no reason at all. People started thinking that this was the cause of a demonic possession or some ghost that was making people lose their minds, but in actuality, nobody had any idea why these people were doing this. This wasn't a casual waltz either. These people were going hard. These people went so hard that they literally danced themselves to death. I can't possibly imagine going so hard at the club that I died, but that's basically what happened here with these people. There are actual claims that at one point in the heat of all this dancing, up to 15 people were dying per day just from dancing. This death kept happening and these people would continue dancing around all of these bodies. This plague went on until September when it just suddenly subsided, and that was that. No explanation, no reasoning behind it, they just went hard for several months and then stopped. That's why everyone thinks that something demonic has to be the cause of all this. Some people have speculated that food poisoning may have played some role, but that just doesn't make any sense to me because it went on for months. Seriously folks, please comment down below what you think about this or some theories about why this happened, because it has me pretty baffled.
Number 4. The hanging coffins. We're going up to China for our next one, specifically Hubei, China. There's a cave there that the locals call the Cave of the Fairies, and you've probably already realized that there's gonna be a dark secret involved with the Cave of Fairies. We never talk about anything nice here. It was said that the mythical creatures were supposed to live in the cave, but those who explored it inside found that there wasn't much of anything living at all, instead finding something deeply disturbing. Rows and rows of coffins, some hanging from ropes, some jammed, wedged between the rocks of the cave. The coffins themselves were massive, weighing around 200 pounds each, and some destroyed and ravaged. Dating the coffins puts them at around 1200 years old, and are thought to have been put up by the ancient Bo people, an extinct culture hailing from China, famous for this unique practice of hanging coffins from caves. It's thought that this served two purposes. 1. As a ritualistic offering meant to bless the dead, and 2. From a practical, pragmatic sense, it would prevent any would-be carrion eaters from picking through to get a meal. Fascinatingly, it can be seen that all of the coffins were carved from a single tree, one big log. One wonders if that was part of the ritual element of it. Now the coffins being smashed is interesting, because the discoverers of the coffins theorized that the damage was actually pretty recent, dating it to the 1960s. And their prevailing theory was that someone wandered into this cave in a place of desperation and smashed the coffins to garner some firewood in the hopes that they could survive the night and not pass among the hanging dead. Let's just hope they didn't release any ancient curses at the same time.
Number 3 on this list is the Coral Castle. The Coral Castle is a limestone structure located in Florida. It is super unique and has these strange limestone rocks that have been carved into various figures. Now there's nothing inherently cursed about this place. However, similar to the pyramids or Stonehenge that we covered in our last video, people wonder how on earth this place was made. Edward Leeds Scallon was a self-taught Russian engineer who came to America. He lived from 1887 to 1951 and is credited with being the creator of the Coral Castle. What's absolutely crazy about this story though, is he constructed the structure all by himself. This is what baffles people to this day. How on earth is it possible that one man in the early 1900s was capable of moving these limestones and carving them the way that they are single-handedly? These stones weigh thousands of pounds, and there's no way that a man would ever be able to lift these things with sheer strength. Now, he was an engineer, and people have speculated that it was potentially the use of magnetism, something that he was fascinated with in his life. When asked how he was able to do this, he replied, "I understand the laws of weight and leverage, and I know the secrets of the people who built the pyramids." This kind of makes sense, but with the pyramids, they had thousands of people working on them all at once. You were only one man. People have theorized that Edward actually had some supernatural abilities that he was hiding from the public. This could honestly be believable because his personality was apparently extremely eccentric and very strange. However Edward was able to construct the Coral Castle, it truly is remarkable. Number 2 on this list is the oldest ghost story of all time. Ever wonder when all this started? When did humans start believing in ghosts, or when did we have our first encounter with a poltergeist? Well, a 3,500-year-old tablet may have the earliest depiction of a ghost as we know them today. This is a small tablet that was made in ancient Babylon and is considered by some experts to be one of the first, if not the first, written depiction of a ghost. The ghostly drawings could be easily missed, and you have to really pay attention if you're going to see it. An expert on the subject, Irvin Finkel, says, "You'd probably never give it a second thought because the area where the drawings are looks like it's got no writing, but when you examine it and hold it under a lamp, those figures leap out at you across time in the most startling way." The tablet goes into detail on how to get rid of ghosts and calls for an exorcist. It explains how this exorcist must make figurines of a man and a woman, and also speak the words of Mesopotamian god Shemesh to get rid of the ghost. There's also a warning to the reader to not turn around, potentially an indicator that a ghost could be behind you, or you could risk getting sucked into the underworld if your focus isn't steady. This tablet also lists a bunch of materials that can be used in rituals and that can be used to prevent ghosts from appearing in the first place. This is super interesting because it means that ghosts and spirits visiting the living can be traced all the way back to the ancient Mesopotamians. We were having paranormal events happen to us thousands of years ago, and the action of exorcising demons and ghosts, it all started with these guys. One could argue that they were the founders and innovators of a lot of our ghostly practices and knowledge to this day. Number 1 on this list is Oak Island. Oak Island is a very mysterious island that has been shrouded in lore for years. It's a privately owned island off the south shore of Nova Scotia, Canada. It has so many rumors surrounding it that it's even got its own television show called The Curse of Oak Island that has 8 seasons under its belt. This is a reality television show by the History Channel where they explore the mysteries of Oak Island, and considering they're on season 8, it's fair to say that there have been quite a few mysteries. The one that's gained the most international fame, though, is the Money Pit. The Money Pit is supposedly a place on Oak Island where there's a plethora of buried treasure waiting for somebody to dig it up. This treasure was left by the pirate Captain William Kidd, who lived from 1645 to 1701. There's said to be vast riches here, however no one's been able to find it up until this point. This is largely because finding buried treasure can be extremely difficult, but also due to the curse that surrounds it. The curse that hovers over this treasure states that 7 men will die in search of the treasure before it's found. To this day, there have actually been 6 deaths associated with this buried treasure. That means that if one more person was to die whilst they're looking for it, then the treasure would either reveal itself, or the next person who goes looking for it would be the one who finds it. Problem with this is that there's one more person who needs to die, and I don't think that anyone wants to be that unlucky number 7. Other than this pirate treasure, there's also rumored to be some extremely valuable and mystical items here. Never before seen Shakespearean plays, the Holy Grail, and the Ark of the Covenant have all been linked to Oak Island. If searching for cursed treasure is your cup of tea, and this is definitely the place for you.
Number 5. King Casimir IV. In the 1970s, 12 archaeologists opened a tomb in Krakow, Poland of unknown date. Somewhere around 500 years ago, they think. 1427, King Casimir Jagiellon IV. He grows up to become the Grand Duke of Lithuania in 1440, and then, eventually, King of Poland in 1447. Fast forward back to the 1970s. The Chapel of Wawel Castle. They find a wooden coffin basically rotten, and what remained were only sections of the king's decaying corpse. Spooky. But then 4 out of the 12 researchers who were working on exhuming the tomb passed away the following couple of days. Suddenly this seemed to be a repeat of a similar event that happened about 50 years ago. Yeah. At least a dozen researchers, either working on site or handling artifacts in a lab, began to experience severe health problems, even lethal. Yeah. Talk about cursed tombs. Holy moly. An agreement to examine the historical site was debauched for a while. Excitement for any kind of scientific research due to the strict government in the 1970s, you see. Cardinal Karol Wojtyla, this guy was a huge supporter of scientific research and already studying King Casimir's dad. He was responsible for the decision to open and study the tomb a few years later. And after that, a few years later, he becomes Pope John Paul II. Like, how awesome is that? Guy was woke back then. He was like, nah, science rules, we need to dig in. The story caught the attention of a nation. Before the burial site was exhumed, the archaeologists and citizens all joked that the tomb was cursed and those who continued should proceed with caution. And then 4 of them, well, yeah. I mean, numerous types of mold spores that cause potential health risks to humans if inhaled. This is like the Howard Carter case all over again. Most tombs in ancient sites contain a pathogenic fungus called Aspergillus flavus. Causes allergies, asthma, and likely fatality. Yeah. Big stuff. Heavy stuff.
Number 4 on this list is the lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis is a city that is considered to be a utopian society in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was first documented by Plato in 2 of his works, Timaeus and Critias. Now, even though Atlantis is often referred to as a city these days, back then Plato described it as an island. This island was located in the Atlantic and was said to be pretty massive, bigger than Asia Minor and Libya combined. This island, or city, was extremely wealthy and had a surplus of resources. This is what led them to being considered a utopia and a highly advanced group. Now, Plato describes a great battle between these Atlanteans and the Athenians and says that after lots of hard fighting, the Athenians eventually prevailed in the war. Then, several massive earthquakes caused the earth to shift, and the entire island of Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea and now rests at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. Many people have speculated on how accurate these tales from Plato are, with experts believing that this could just all be a myth. However, the legend of Atlantis started to circulate around Europe many years later, and people began searching for this lost city. Nobody has found it to this day, but that doesn't mean that it never existed. Maybe we're just thinking about it the wrong way. Some people have thought that this entire city of Atlantis could have been aliens coming down to Earth, and that potentially this island was never really an island to begin with. Plato does describe the society as being a utopia, and an explanation for that would be aliens that have far better technology than we do. Maybe when this island apparently disappeared, these aliens just left. Now, that does beg the question, if they're so advanced, how on earth could the ancient Athenians beat them in a battle? Which I do think is a very fair point. I do believe that Plato and the people after him have exaggerated this story, and the full truth has probably been lost in history. But I also believe that this tale didn't just come out of nowhere, and something potentially paranormal could be at hand.
Number 3. Polish King's Curse. In April 1931, in a crypt in Vilnius, ancient Polish queens and kings were found, but they were found with their crowns still on their heads. Yeah, cryptic stuff. It was a royal burial, you see. Described by those involved as the discovery of a century. Polish researchers didn't even know what they were in for. After a massive storm had flooded a crumbling cathedral in Vilnius, they threw down sandbags to preserve the artifacts, but on the night of April 25th, the water had won the battle and the chambers were completely flooded. They followed the water deeper and deeper to the lost remains of Polish kings and queens from the 15th century. Storm of the century, I'd say. Out of place and messy, but definitely royal nonetheless. The floating muddy remains of Queen Elizabeth Habsburg and Queen Barbara Radziwiłłona. Royalty. Not meant to be really floating around in the rainwater, you know? Now, after these discoveries, that's when things get creepy. That's when the talks of a so-called curse began. Those involved in the findings began to die in unusual circumstances. Professors falling down elevator shafts, 2 having undisclosed medical issues, 1 professor becoming paralyzed in an accident. Professor Julius Claus died from an unusual illness. Like, scary. Even a sculptor involved died when untying his shoelaces. That sort of stuff. Like creepy curse stuff. Even if you try and protect the remains of lost kings and queens and their history, even if you're involved, the curse apparently will get you. These curses are heavy, dude. These people were just trying to help and preserve this stuff, but royal curses are royal curses. Spooky stuff. Number 2, fairy forts. So apparently fairy forts in Ireland are a thing. A very respected and very old thing. This is awesome and equally terrifying. Something about a big burly Irishman saying, "Oh, you don't go messing around them fairy mounds now, son." Like, that's horrifying. I'm surprised there isn't more indie Irish horror movies about these things. Serious business. More than 45,000 of them still surviving, and approximately 10,000 destroyed since the first large survey in the 19th century. In County Clare, locals protested the path was through an ancient fairy bush, or a fairy mound. So be careful if you live in Ireland, because apparently an ancient curse of Tara has been unleashed by the destruction of a fundamental ancient fairy fort. Traditional myth and local legend says interfering with fairies' homes is to risk your own life, with most believing strongly in the curse of Tara, the retribution of fairies on those involved in the disturbance of their natural home. In this case, the M3 motorway. Yeah, the N22 is the main road between Killarney and County Kerry and Cork, Ireland, otherwise known as the Emerald Isle. associated with fairies for more than hundreds of years, dating back to the Iron Age and beyond, when the country was said to be under the power of the mystical Tuatha De Danann, a race of supernatural beings which were kind of like gods. In June 2007, Minister for the Environment Dick Roche signed an order destroying the Lismullenhenge. Lismullenhenge was a 4,000-year-old astronomical observatory and place of worship, once hailed as one of the most important archaeological finds of the century. And, of course, bad things followed. Surveyors held up by an armed gang, the Minister for Transport sucked out of a helicopter when the door mysteriously fell off, the Chief of Health and Safety Officer was struck by a falling tree. Hey, how about we listen to this ancient Irish lore and not around, huh? Also, it's a road. You can't build a little curve around a 4,000-year-old monument? Really? Come on, people. Number 1. Fiscius and Porcello. 2 cursed 1600-year-old lead tablets in the Museo Archeologico Civico di Bologna were recently deciphered. And one of them turns out to be one of the first known surviving curses directed at a Roman senator. That can't be good. This one's a juicy one. Well, these two, because it's a pair of lead curse tablets. First off, how much must you have someone off before they get a big rock and start chipping and chiseling away at it for like 4 years straight? Like, if you're still mad after a day of chiseling rock or metal, it's serious. Usually a couple of deep breaths in about 5 minutes gets you over anything. But like, you know what I mean? Just anger. A drawing of a snake-headed deity, possibly Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, crossroads, and sorcery, with her arms crossed and a star carved over her. Although her name is not mentioned, the phrasing of the invocation is similar to the other curses that enlist Hecate in their dark curses. The crossed arms symbolize the binding of the deity to the curse. The goddess will remain bound until its terms are fulfilled. This is what it says. Quote, "Crush, kill Fistus the senator. May Fistus dilute, languish, sink, and may all of his limbs dissolve." Okay, it's a little harsh, no? The other lead tablet, cursing Porcello, has a little less violence, but still, yeah, pretty hateful. The cursed person's named Porcello and his wife Morelia. Same snake-headed deity with crossed arms, but this time, Porcello gets a drawing too. He's portrayed as a wrapped mummy with his arms crossed and his name written on both of them. Quote, "Destroy, crush, kill, strangle Porcello and Morelia. Their soul, heart, and buttocks, liver." Again, what did these people do? Like, liver? That's so specific. Unfortunately, we don't know where they came from. They were acquired by the museum in the 19th century, then forgotten about until about their rediscovery in 2009. The museum has no specific record of acquisition of the tablet's provenance. They could be anywhere from the late Roman Empire. Yeah, anywhere. The two curses, mainly written in Latin and inscribed on thin lead, would have been created by two different people in the late life of the Roman Empire. They both lay at the Museo Archeologico Civico in Italy. Yo, I don't want to get dissolved. People are saying dissolved a lot, you know? That's really harsh. This curses, man. Serious stuff.
Number 5. The Knife Blade Man. Discovered in 2018 in northern Italy, a group of archaeologists were digging up a massive gravesite of the Lombardo, an ancient Germanic people. Found in a necropolis, which is a very fancy word for a large, elaborate tomb, and maybe one of the best words in the English language, the team found hundreds of skeletons that were at the site, including horses and greyhounds, and for the most part, you know, they're not particularly notable. You've seen one old bag of bones, you've seen them all, except for one skeleton that in the place of a forearm was an impressive blade. Now this raises countless fascinating questions. Who was this guy? Was this the first Assassin's Creed protagonist? Some legendary madman of a warrior who lost an arm and thought, I don't know, put a blade on there, I can still fight? Well, the Lombardo people placed a great emphasis on war and combat in their culture, so it is possible. The researchers noted that there was a clear dated buckle around his arm, and pressure on the bones of his arm showed that it was an intentional prosthetic, right down to the wear and tear on his teeth, suggesting he tightened the straps for his hidden blade with his teeth. Most of the other skeletons found in the necropolis all had blades buried with them at their sides, perhaps ritually out of honor, but this unique specimen had it grafted onto his arm like he's history's first cyborg or Baraka from Mortal Kombat. To be able to not only survive an amputation, pre-antibiotics and modern medicine is already impressive. And hey, if you're always looking to learn something from knife arm skeletons, then toss a subscribe our way. Top 5 Scaries always got a couple scary videos for you every day. Let's creep on creeping on.
Number 4, the Assyrian tablet. As always, dudes, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, hit that thumbs up button, alright? 6'1" height. That's how tall I am, and that's how tall our next curse is, but engraved onto a slab of basalt. 6'1", absolutely massive, and talk about heavy too. Quote, "Whoever discards this image from the presence of Salmanu puts it in another place, whether he throws it into water or covers it with earth, or brings and places it in a taboo house where it is inaccessible. May the god Salmanu, the great lord, overthrow his sovereignty. May his name and his seed disappear in the land." Okay, yep, no, that's definitely a curse. Sounds like Rush lyrics, doesn't it? I feel like Geddy Lee wrote this. Written by an unknown author, inscribed onto an Assyrian tablet 800 BC. Definitely not Rush then. And again, this thing is massive, but now, unfortunately, broken in two. One half ended up in the hands of the British Museum and the other Bonham's auction house. Look, I understand private collectors are a thing, but like, can we just have like a non-biased, geographically neutral ancient library that we can all just collectively study? So many "that's mine," "no, that's mine." Sounds like kids fighting over this stuff, doesn't it? We're all just curious, we want to know. The fragment in the British Museum's collection was found in 1879 in Syria. It was formed in basalt to commemorate a military achievement of King Adad Nirari III. The British Museum has the top of the statue with the image of the knight's head portion. Again, this thing has gone through so many legalities about ownership, like where did we find it? Who wrote it? The carvings show the rulers alongside sacred symbols, the winged sun disk of Shamash, the star of Ishtar, and the thunderbolt of the weather god Adad. The lower portion was put up for auction by a private collector in London in 2014, and in 2017, the bottom half made international headlines once again. This time it was at the center of a dispute between its former owner and the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London. The commissioner apparently was sued by a Lebanese antiques dealer after police confiscated the relic. Yeah, too much arguing for me. Like, just share it. Couple months here, couple months there. I don't know. Just get along so we can study the damn thing.
Number 3, the black sarcophagus. Now you might have heard of this one before. If you were on Twitter much a couple years ago, maybe you remember vaguely hearing about sarcophagus juice. Maybe those words are ringing a strange bell. There was a pretty good petition going around to let people drink the sarcophagus juice. But let's back up a bit. What is sarcophagus juice and where did it come from and why do we want to drink it? Well, I've got the answers. Somewhat. I've got some answers. In 2018, a team of archaeologists digging in Alexandria, Egypt, discovered a massive granite black sarcophagus, which immediately set off everybody's warning signs that you should not touch that. People wondered what the 30-ton stone slab could be containing, with some even suggesting it could have been the mighty body of Alexander the Great. People warned the archaeologists that there, could be some ancient evil, like when King Tut's tomb was raided and a very strange curse befell the explorers and excavators. Well, what they found wasn't a hidden curse, but honestly something stranger. 3 skeletons inside the coffin with a skull shattered by an arrow and a whole lot of mysterious black goop, or sarcophagus juice. So again, looping right back around it. What is the sarcophagus juice and does it taste good? Well, scientists analyzed the sludge and discovered that it was made from a combination of animal fats, tree resin, beeswax, and crude oil. The sludge has been recovered out of multiple coffins and sarcophagi, so it's not exclusive to this dreaded one. But that doesn't explain why this nasty stuff is there. Well, there's some theories about this, no concrete answers, but I'll do my best. It's said that when someone died, they become a form of the god Osiris, who is associated with death and rebirth. Osiris was called the Black One, and is depicted with very dark black skin in the guise of a mummified body. As well, black is also a color associated with the deposits on the bank of the River Nile after a flood season. Fresh and fertile soil was seen as inherently regenerative. So it's theorized that with the linking concepts of Osiris and the regeneration of the soil, soaking and filling the coffins with this black sludge was a very confusing part of the mummification process. Number 2. Headless Vikings. In 2008, a group of archaeologists were doing some fairly routine work in Dorset, a seaside town in England, in a rather dull job to improve local roads around the area. As could be expected, not too much of note was discovered, except for the mass grave of 54 Headless Viking mercenaries. And not just were their skulls missing, but the rib cages, arms, and leg bones were all arranged neatly, surrounded by discarded teeth. No clothes or weaponry was discovered. So what happened? Because nothing my imagination is coming up with is conjuring anything good. Well, the bones revealed some fascinating finds, and I'll warn you now, by Odin's beard, they're all terrifying options. The teeth surrounding the grave were all filed down, but done neatly as if a craftsman had done it. Obviously, pre-Novocaine dental surgery wouldn't go down easy, so the process must have been excruciating, suggesting perhaps these men had had it done to them out of some sort of punishment, or they did it to themselves to frighten their opponents and show them just how strong they were. Neither one of those options is particularly pleasant to consider. But now let's get spine chillin' with it. The archaeologists' prevailing theory about what happened to this big Nordic pile of bones is that looking at the wound patterns on the ribs and the torso bones were smart, surgical, precise blows, not matching with a rabid hack job you'd expect from a brawl. The archaeologists suggested that the Vikings weren't slain in battle, but rather offered up perhaps to some sort of strange, sadistic ritual, or perhaps a mass execution. It would explain why the men had no gear with them as well. The large number of bodies and intense cruelty of it suggests that there wasn't any trained executioners, leading to the prevailing theory that it's a dark, dark ritual. Number 1. Bog people. Name one good thing that's ever been found in a bog. Need some help? There's never been one. For peat farmers in northern Europe, it's a thankless life, working in wet, muddy bogs and occasionally finding leathery preserved bog mummies. Due to the low temperatures, lack of oxygen, and high acidity of bogs, bodies found there are preserved disturbingly well. Well, preserved is a bit of a misnomer. They're twisted and rived, but they're intact sort of. It's hard to think of these as preserved well because they look like the scariest things you've ever seen, but the process is weirdly fascinating if you're interested in looking up something disgusting. This happens all over northwestern Europe, with no one specific case to point to. It happens all over Ireland, Germany, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and so on. The bodies range from anywhere as old as 8,000 years old, preserved, to the most recent appearing to have been from the early turn of our century. Now, no one really has any idea how many of these bog bodies could be out there, and no one really knows how the unfortunate bog victims ended up in their final muddy resting spot. Some of them could possibly have just been unlucky souls who found themselves lost and fell in. But another prevailing theory is that Roman Iron Age people in northern Europe sacrificed people to the bogs, which sounds too dark to be real, but apparently is. They would also offer people as sacrifice or as punishment for their perceived social imperfections, which, may I just say, I am very glad this practice isn't commonplace, because I would be cast into the bogs faster than you could say peat deposit.